The optimal way to deliver communications when you're behind enemy lines is not to go into town and set up a tower, but it's to sneak people behind and then use internet from space.
How did you build such conviction in this space?
We have the best engineers. We have capital flowing into it. These are really exciting developments that are coming out of the category now. I think it is coming much faster than people realize. 10,000 working satellites right now with a vehicle that brings up maybe 25 satellites each trip.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Philip Palumbo, and I'm host of the Palumbo podcast, where we interview some of the most successful founders of businesses to learn about their journey to the top, as well as exiting their business. And we also speak to economists, portfolio managers, and alternative investment managers as well. Today, I'm lucky enough to have with us on the show co-founder and general partner of Bollarian Space Ventures, Phil Scully, a venture capital firm investing in early to mid-stage private space companies that are building the backbone of the new space economy. Phil brings a rare blend of experience in aerospace engineering and institutional investing, with a proven track record of backing groundbreaking ventures at the intersection of space, defense, and advanced technology. His investment thesis centers on space infrastructure as a foundational asset class, much like telecommunications or logistics, and emphasizes dual-use technologies across launch, transport, orbital infrastructure, in-space manufacturing, and defense systems. Through Bollarian, Phil and his team are funding the companies developing the infrastructure for humanity's next frontier, helping to shape the emerging ecosystem that will make space accessible, sustainable, and economically viable. Phil, this is an incredible space to be in. I'm super excited to have you on the show, and thank you for your time today. I appreciate it, especially that you're away from your office.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm traveling today in beautiful Austin, Texas, traveling with a very large investor, family office out of South Africa, and they are so excited to be in the U.S. and visiting Texas. So it's a really fun day for Bollarian and for myself.
Awesome. As I said, I was just in Dallas, Texas just last week. Great place to be, a lot of fun, good food. So I always enjoy being in Texas. So Phil, I want to start with, if you can, tell my audience exactly what you do.
Yeah, Bollarian is investing into private companies. So we're investing into early stage startups. So think about companies that maybe have 10 or 15 individuals and they have a product they're working on. The product that our companies are particularly focused on is around space and defense tech. So different ways to put assets into space, maybe different propulsion systems, different ways to get technology communications down from space. So we're investing into those companies. They're long-term investments we're making into private companies. And then those companies quickly, after a short period of time, start to scale and get bigger government contracts from the U.S. government or from her allies. And so we've been around for about 5 years, invested into companies now that are more well-known. A company like SpaceX has become well-known for most investors, although it's still a private company and not a public company yet.
So when you think about the two industries, so would you agree it's space tech and then it's defense tech?
Yeah, the connection between space and life on Earth, we don't even realize how much information we get down when we're watching TV from space. I don't think we realize how connected things are. Our regular activity, GPS, Starlink is becoming almost a product where I talk to people and I hear a story. I was camping with my kids and I used Starlink. I was at Burning Man and I used Starlink to do a call. I'm on a plane and I had YouTube on the plane because I'm using Starlink. So we're seeing this strong connection between space and life on Earth, and the government, especially Department of War or sovereign nations, need capabilities to defend their countries, to be dominant. And those capabilities are coming from space companies. So think about, you're trying to track troops. Well, what's the greatest vantage point to track troops from? It's not from a high mountain. it's probably from the moon or from low Earth orbit. Same thing with communications. The optimal way to deliver communications when you're behind enemy lines is not to go into town and set up a tower, but it's to sneak people behind and then use internet from space. So we're starting to see more and more of the innovation that's going into the Ukraine and into the battlefield, and it's coming from companies like SpaceX, companies like Anduril. So VC-backed startup companies are driving all the incredible innovation in the wars.
So what is the total addressable market using space as a business?
Oh, it's very large. Right now, we have a $2 trillion company in SpaceX, which has a really great asset, a communications asset. I think we are just scratching the surface with a company like SpaceX. I think the opportunity here is much larger than maybe any market we've ever seen. There have been
Wow.
this like thought online recently on X, and it's around a new type of company, a company called a quadrillion-dollar company. So I'm sure for folks on the podcast, this might be the first time maybe you've heard this number, quadrillion. So, several years ago, there was a thought that maybe we'd have $1 trillion public company, and now we have several. There's a thought that we have much, much bigger companies in space, like companies that are 1,000 trillion or a quadrillion. So the markets that we have within communications, think about if AT&T or a mobile network operator had all of the customers on Earth, that's about 7.3 billion people that have handsets. Those folks can't hit a tower and can't get the internet because they don't have infrastructure. Once you lift the towers into space and you have a million satellites, there is no limitation. Internet is almost free. Now imagine, rather than having that constellation of a million satellites and it services just Earth, imagine now that constellation can move and is flexible and it services the solar system. So you're seeing a world of abundance developing around AI and around space, and they're kind of happening at the same time.
So when it comes to space investing, how can you divide it up, right? So you could say what space tech and what other segments of space investing? How would you am I saying that right? You
Yeah,
can break it down in segments.
I think it's a great way to think about it. A lot of people with space have thought about kind of like science fiction. And now you've got
Right.
great investors like yourself coming in and trying to parse out like what are the different categories with different opportunities. Space investing currently is about investing in plumbing. So think about infrastructure. Think about we need power. You need power underwater. You need power for data centers. You need power on the moon, especially with a very cold 2 week lunar night. Everything freezes to death. So you need power. Think about space. You have an asset in space. It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Our constellation's worth tens of billions. They got to be in the right place. They got to communicate. So think about power. Now you've got communications. Think about propulsion systems. So in the same way you have like the locomotive engine, in space you have these sophisticated propulsion systems. There's an extraordinary company called Impulse Space. Could be one of the best companies in the world, certainly one of the best private companies. They are a key to kind of moving things around. So propulsion systems are very important. So you've got propulsion as a category, okay, and then within that category you might have a company working on the key weapon systems for the government, or they might be working on something around traveling between planets. Maybe there's similar technologies. Within communications, you could have Starlink, you could have ground stations, you could have edge commute. So within these categories, you have maybe 3 or 4 new categories that are developing. And so as you think about this as an asset class, I think taking it from sort of a framework of thinking about what is the infrastructure that built the internet? What is the infrastructure that built the real estate market? It's just off Earth. So it's slightly different.
So to peel the onion back a little bit more, again, I'm a pretty simple guy, right? So when we say power, right, as a way to invest in space, so give me specifically what you mean by that. Power to power the United States, like the data centers, as an example, or to power.
Yes, great question. So power is you have a an asset that you spend a lot of money and you bring it to the moon, surface of the moon. And that asset, what it's going to do is a very simple task. It's just going to go around and it's going to have maybe a scoop and it's going to prospect. It's looking for some of the most valuable materials and minerals in the world, maybe something like helium-3. So that rover prospecting needs a power system. Okay. Very, very hard to get solar there. Might be very few options. Nuclear energy is by far the most efficient. The Chinese are using Russian plutonium right now on the moon with 2 rovers on the dark side of the moon. Okay. And they're looking for water. You need power for assets on a celestial body because you can't have them freeze to death or they just need to move around. You need power for satellites in space. You need power for them to beam down, deliver their message. You need power for them to keep going.
So you need to install power in space to power other things that are in space.
Yeah, power in space is almost like oil.
We're not necessarily talking about power, building power in space to power things on Earth. It's talking about power in space to build power in space.
So once you get into space, you start thinking about how you power things, and probably the first area you'd think about would be nuclear energy. And it's there's a renaissance happening in nuclear because of the demand for electricity at home. So we call that dual use. There are other areas when you start to explore space using beaming technology, using mirrors, where you can use the sun's unlimited energy to do something called space-based solar power. So using mirrors to reflect down beams of energy. These are areas that have long been dreamed about and thought about, but because of the incredible amount of capital going into space, because of the fully democratized launch market, because now instead of governments doing activities, you have commercial companies, we're seeing significant breakthroughs here. We're starting to see companies deliver very strong fundamentals in these areas. So power in space has multiple different dimensions.
Wow, that's fascinating. So when you say, so historically speaking, the government was involved with space exploration, right? But the business of space in the commercial side, how new is that?
It's very new. Yeah. Traditionally, the government was building, very customized products that cost billions of dollars. You would use that and throw it away. And for a private investor, the thought of investing and then at the end of that, you don't get cash flow and a dividend check, you throw it out. It doesn't make any sense. So we now have companies that are very focused on delivering revenues, delivering profits, and it's less focused on science fiction. It's more focused on science fact. So Elon and SpaceX, their focus is not to explore space and then come back and they write something up and share it with their academic peers.
Right.
Their focus is to build the largest company we've ever seen. They've been successful so far, and have that company deliver revenues that we've never seen before. And now SpaceX, which has been around more than 20 years, has an army of people that are like-minded. So when you leave the world of SpaceX and you do your startup, your focus isn't, I'm going to deliver this, I'm going to write an academic thing. No, your point is, I'm going to build the biggest, baddest company that we've ever seen in the world. And those companies exist only in space and defense tech right now. And there are two of them. One is called Anduril, best entrepreneur in the world. His name is Palmer Luckey. And then SpaceX, one of the best entrepreneurs we've ever seen. And then behind them is an army of invisible companies because they exist in VC or private equity or venture capital. But soon these are going to become household names that everyone will know, like great industrial companies that the U.S. used to build. No longer is the U.S. building these Me Too software companies and these derivative internet companies. The U.S., the best engineers in the world from the U.S., they're building hardware companies now, and it's gonna surprise people over the next couple of years. But investors are not surprised. It's where the best performance is in the last few years.
So you have a belief that the space business can potentially be more than a multi-trillion dollar business.
Yeah, I think what people now are discounting, especially with SpaceX, is that there are companies that will build the infrastructure of the new space economy that are extraordinarily valuable, and they will have a monopoly on that for decades. So in the same way that, several decades ago, we built the internet, there were companies that people invested in at the very beginning of the internet. And then, decades later, they were still dominant players. Companies like Microsoft, companies like Google, people invested in those as very early companies. And then 10 years, 20 years, they're very large companies. So those are some of the largest companies in the world. I think space has that type of potential. I think we're already there. SpaceX will soon be the largest company in the world. They're going to be a public company at 2 trillion very soon, maybe in the next few weeks. And then behind them is a few other great companies.
So where do you envision SpaceX being? So they're going to launch at 2 trillion. I agree with you. And where do you see SpaceX going in terms of valuation?
I think there's this thought of it being worth hundreds of trillions of dollars. You have a company that delivers, a company that connects folks all the time, everywhere on Earth, maybe everywhere in the solar system, but everywhere on Earth. You have people that cannot get a tower in emerging markets. That's about 250 billion of revenue per year. That's lost revenue for the mobile network operators. People that don't in developed countries, like folks like ourselves, we don't hit a tower. And my understanding, that's about 150 billion. So if you can do range extension, enormous market. If you can do new people getting devices because they never hit a tower, probably multiples of that. That is just a small fraction of the potential for SpaceX. I believe that SpaceX within the lunar and Martian economy will generate revenues that are multiples of that. And then the new thing that people are talking about is something called data centers. So a lot of activity that folks are doing on Earth, those will be in the future, probably activities that happen in space. You need lower launch costs, you need more frequent launch costs. SpaceX is building a skyscraper that goes to space called Starship. That delivers not 10, 15 satellites, it delivers hundreds of satellites. And so there's this thought that data centers will not destroy the beautiful landscape of our country, but they will be in space. And the two leaders of that are SpaceX and NVIDIA, and the CEOs of those two companies.
I mean, that is just unbelievable. I mean, so you really believe that's going to happen, data centers in space?
I think it is coming much, much faster than people realize. I think the people that are investing in SpaceX are the people with the front row seat of that. And then I think there are a couple other companies that are probably also connected to that kind of investment thesis or that thought.
I mean, so Phil, this is the part, I guess, when I think about that, right? So today, data center, it's a big, huge building with racks and GPUs, CPUs, and so on and so forth. So when you take that, what we're doing here on Earth, how do they put that in space? Because with gravity and what does that look like? Do the racks of GPUs, CPUs go into space?
So the constellation that SpaceX currently has with Starlink is 10,000 working satellites right now. 10,000 satellites are above us right now, delivering internet from space. They have they have built that constellation over the last 6 or 7 years with a vehicle that brings up maybe 25 satellites each trip. They have a new vehicle that has the ability to launch, and when it comes down, it's caught with chopsticks. You can then take the chopsticks, turn the chopsticks, put a new Starship on with a new payload, and almost launch immediately to space. SpaceX is going to be assembly line building rockets to go to space, assembly line building satellites that will be mini data centers. Like we think about um, Ford mass producing the Model T. Where we are right now, or where we've been for the last few years, is people are riding around with horse and buggies. And in a few years, we're all going to be riding in a Model T. And I think it's more similar, not from a horse and buggy to a Model T. It's almost like you're going from a horse and buggy to a Ford Raptor R. The leap forward. There's this famous quote for all of your listeners here by the Russian dictator Vladimir Lenin. And Lenin says, there are decades where nothing happens. And then there are weeks where decades happen. And within space, for space investors, we're going through a week where decades are happening every week for the last year and a half.
That is, I love that, man. That is so fascinating. That really is. People listening to this, it's incredible your conviction about what you're saying. How did you build such conviction in this space?
I think once you get under the hood and start,
no pun intended about that.
Yeah, space is a fun one because it has a lot of puns, and a lot of like quirky sayings.
Yeah.
I think once you get under the hood, once investors spend some time in this asset class, what they'll see is they'll see something that they think is very far away. And the way I think about it is a long duration risky asset. And I think that's how space has been for a long time, especially with the government involvement. And I think it's not that anymore. I think the best entrepreneurs, guys like Palmer Luckey, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bridget Mendler, building Northwood. These are the best entrepreneurs in the world. And these folks have all gone into one area. They're all going to build space and defense and nuclear energy companies. So a CEO like Isaiah Taylor is going to some place where he can make a significant change. And so these hardware companies that you might consider like, well, that's a very hard problem to solve. Yes, it is. But now we have the best engineers. We have capital flowing into it. And in a lot of these areas, as exciting as it sounds in nuclear energy that we're doing great things again, 30, 40 years ago, we were amazing in nuclear energy. It's just the US decided to stop. The Chinese haven't stopped. So when you look over at China, different cultures, different people, they are absolutely far and away, doing some things in hardware that were not in the US. So I think once you get under the hood, you realize like, hey, we're like doing well here because maybe we just dropped the ball for a long time and weren't focused on it. But these are really exciting developments that are coming out of the category now.
And you believe, Phil, a lot of your conviction that you have is built through your network and sitting down with a lot of smart people. It's really funny you're saying that. So I run an emerging growth strategy with my firm here. And one of the PMs that work directly with my firm, Mark Weiss, he's always said, and I asked Mark, how do you build conviction in emerging companies that you own today? And why do you go into that space? And when he had said, he goes, just look what the big companies are doing and look at where they're investing in. He goes, they're investing in those areas for a reason. And so what he tries to do is let's say, for example, Google, right? So Google all of a sudden has Waymo, but that's not really what Google does, but they're investing their money there. So he wants to just find a pure player in the private market that is in the same space that these bigger companies are investing in, that they believe one day will be something big. So it's like we just said today, a lot of the billionaires of the world today, they are investing in space. And so I guess that's one reason when you look at, these people are not stupid. So if they're making these investments, they believe they see some type of total addressable market to invest in. Would you agree what I just said in the way I framed that?
Yeah, I think it's a great strategy, a great point. Yeah, it's like you want to follow the smart money, I guess. Like those folks have a lot of resources and have a lot of smart people around them, and they're probably making long-term bets and long-term decisions. And I think that's for a lot of investors. Like you want to pay attention to everything that's interesting, but it can be a lot of noise. Space, I think everyone probably on this podcast, everyone listening they probably have an idea that space is the future. I think once you get under the hood, you peel the onion a little bit, you just realize like that future is now versus like I have to wait a long time. It's the
I would agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you. 100%. So, so Phil, just to understand a little bit about you, right? So you're investing. So today, your focus is primarily the space economy. Would you agree with that?
That's right. Yeah, we're primarily focused on investing into hardware companies. So companies building exquisite hardware. That could be a power system, could be a propulsion system. So it's space technology. A lot of companies do space and defense. Those are combined. And then a lot of nuclear energy companies, a lot of power companies are also space companies. So you're trying to solve for, power that's off Earth. And then what is incredible now is that you're just seeing a connection. You're seeing a customer on Earth and a customer off Earth, and they need the same product. And so the term that people use, it's a great term. It's called dual use. And so this term for investors, dual use, over the last 2 or 3 years has been synonymous with extraordinary returns. If you get into dual use, you get a long duration risky asset with big TAMs, and you get a very attractive near-term opportunity. The last couple of years, the opportunity to invest in government or defense, with Palantir, with
Right.
Anduril, you could go anywhere. And if you're investing in defense, you're doing extraordinarily well.
Yeah. So when you say, I'm sorry, so Phil, so I apologize for this, but dual use. So just define dual use.
Dual use is when you have a similar technology, and it's used in two different theaters. So you might have a company and they build something like a solid rocket motor. Okay, and a solid rocket motor might fit really well into something called like a key weapon system that the government is using. Okay, so that could be like a javelin or a stinger. A javelin or stinger uses a solid rocket motor, and that's used in the wartime environment. Okay, the same solid rocket motor, you just take that off and you bring it over to a Earth to orbit transport vehicle, a vehicle that goes to space, like the shuttle. On the side of the shuttle, you have those huge canisters. Those are solid rocket motors. That technology being used in two places. So dual use, there's no difference at all. The customer is very different, but the product is exactly the same. When you have that dynamic, you have the ability to get this very large long-term opportunity, and you just supercharged it with a near-term, like very strong opportunity that has great tailwinds. And so we call it, internally, we call it like theater agnostic technology. Now, you might be like, okay, that's interesting. But what we've noticed is more and more companies in space are dual use. So a company goes to space and their model is we're going to manufacture in space. Okay. And there might be a reason why you want to manufacture. We're going to reformulate drugs. There might be a reason. Doesn't sound like military to you, probably, or for your listeners, doesn't sound like military. What if I told you that that company, when it comes back, it crash lands in the Utah desert? What if I told you that when it re-enters, it's going very fast and it's going hypersonic speeds? You might say, wow, I've been reading a lot about hypersonics. The US is trying to catch up on hypersonics. Could that be a test bed for a hypersonic sensor? Yes. That company, Varda, has now become one of the best dual-use companies in our portfolio because they figured out that they could be a test bed for hypersonic capabilities for the U.S. government. So they're winning large contracts from the U.S. government related to hypersonics. The dual-use story is probably very early. And investors that have been able to figure out this dual-use story, they have been in incredible performing stocks and private companies. A lot of the activity, to be honest, is in the private market because this is early stuff, but these will be public companies soon. SpaceX will be public soon, and a number of others.
So I want to transition the conversation to venture capital investing because obviously it relates to what we're talking about. So essentially, someone like you, and not just you, but a lot of these venture capital managers, sometimes you're invested in seed companies or Series A, call it, right? So we're talking about early stage companies. And a lot of times, Phil, there's a story behind these companies that you're being sold on, which is why you're deciding to invest in these companies. It's not like one of my biggest positions in my portfolios on the common equity side of things is Google, Amazon, Costco, Waste Management. Those businesses produce free cash flows, very predictable, stable earnings over long periods of time. So it's, as an investor, it's really simple to invest in those businesses and hold on to it for a long period of time. When you're investing as a venture capitalist into these early stage companies, walk us through in the most simplistic way how you build conviction and what are the top 3 ways of why you say to yourself, I just met with this entrepreneur, I heard the story, I'm super interested. Why? What makes you super interested?
Oh, this is a really hard question for me to answer because I now work with a team, Philip, and we'll meet with a company and we can just almost look at each other and be like, that's it. It's like, that's the category we want. That's the CEO. And so I don't know if you ever read about wolves, how they hunt. But the way wolves hunt is like they go to positions without even communicating to each other. It's like there's some unspoken language. So I think investing in the private markets is a different discipline than investing into the public markets where you're trying to figure out earnings and you're trying to figure out what's the long-term potential of this business, what's a reasonable valuation. In the private markets, it's like you have to really believe in the people. Can these people adjust the business? Can they go out and get that first customer? Do they have the grit? Are they able to fundraise? So it's a lot about people. And then I think it's a lot about getting like what you were talking about before, being in the right area, a right category, and trying to catch like a mega trend. So I think a few years ago, we made a decision to invest in a couple companies and that turned out great for our LPs. I think if we had chosen maybe the second or third item, the choice that we had, I think we probably would have done great. So I think you want to do a lot of research on the area you're investing into. Right now, power is a great area to invest into. You've got terrestrial demand for electricity, you've got off-Earth activity, and all of that kind of focuses around nuclear energy, And so we like that category, and we're hoping that we get the best team and the best people in that. It feels to us like we have some great companies in there, but probably a lot of companies will work out. So my sense is try and find the best team. You got to stay very close to these companies, stay on top of them. You got to know what the milestone is. And then I think you got to be just in the right area and right category. And then hope for some luck. A lot of things have to fall your way when you're doing startup investing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you with people. People's everything in my opinion, even larger businesses, right? Just like they are with venture capital businesses, emerging companies. I mean, it's all about people, right? I mean, I own my own firm and I know how hard I work to make sure that we're on top of our game and creating what we created for our clients, right? So that's so super, 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 super important. When we say people for you, what is the like when you say the whole wolves and how they hunt for you, when you're sitting down with an entrepreneur, how do you know that that's your guy or gal?
There is a style of communicating where they have almost like this messianic zeal for what they're doing. It's like they're on a mission.
I know exactly.
From a higher power. They're so excited about what they do, and it doesn't have to be what you like and what you're excited about, but the way that they talk about something, it's just, you understand that this is like their passion. They're never gonna miss a detail, and they're gonna inspire people around them. And so I see that with Bridget Mendler at Northwood, Tom Mueller at Impulse. People love working with them, and they're gonna. I'm an optimist, so I believe that if they're in the right category, they'll figure it out. And then our job is to get them the resources, get them the capital, and help them when it becomes difficult. So, not everything works out in VC, but some of the outcomes are very exciting.
Yeah. So I wanted to transition to that exact part, Phil. So from your experience, what should one watch out for as you're interviewing these entrepreneurs? That's immediately you see a red flag and you walk away.
For us, like a red flag, um, it's hard work. So, when you have companies where they have turnover, you have a company that has, maybe 10, 15 people and you lose a key person, very different than if you have a company like McDonald's or Nike and they lose a person. You lose a key person, that could be the end of the company. So turnover, I think, is really, really something we watch for, and we want to make sure people are consistently working together and working well together. So I think that's the big red flag. I think companies can survive having a misstep. A product doesn't work out, a rocket blows up, but you have to have the right people at that business to make sure that, like, after that rocket blows up, we're like going right back to work. Investors, I think, from my perspective, are important. Having the right investors that are going to make long-term decisions, patient capital, I think that's really, really, really critical.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. So, Phil, I want to just conclude with how many companies are invested in your fund right now?
So right now we have 13 companies in our portfolio.
Right. So, do you agree that not all 13 are going to work out?
Not all 13 are going to work out in our portfolio. Um, we are expecting a handful of the companies will work out, and we invest as much capital behind the winners as we can, and we try and concentrate. The ones that are not working out, we try not to invest a lot of time and money, and they just sort of become a small part of the portfolio. But yeah, you definitely want to focus on your winners for sure.
Right. And in the winners, even though you have losers, will way offset, obviously. So if you all of a sudden one of your winners are up 50, 100 times and the loser, you lost one time your capital. Is that how the game is played and how you should be thinking about it?
That's exactly how you should be thinking about it. 100%. Yeah, you should be thinking about it as those companies are going to offset, and you're going to win with the other ones.
Awesome. So Phil, last word is yours. Anything you want to say about venture capital, the space itself, your current business, things you want my audience to know? They're all investors. The stage is yours.
Yeah, please. My name is Phil Scully. I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect. I think this is great questions, great podcast. I think this is a category that folks should, start paying attention to if it's not on their radar, and start following some of the companies. I think that Anduril and SpaceX are incredible companies to see their progress. And then please, if you have any questions, reach out on LinkedIn, or our website is bollarianspace.com if you want to learn about some of the companies we're investing into. But I just think you asked amazing questions and really appreciate you sharing your amazing audience with me.
Phil, thanks a lot. Great having you on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.